Sunset Productions presents an Atlanta Radio Theater Company dramatic production. H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness.
And we'll do a quick sound check before we start the interview. Are you nervous, Professor Dyer?
I have spoken on the radio before, Miss Ashton. A good many times, in fact.
Not for the last 15 years, though.
No, not for the last 15 years.
Now, we're going to transcribe the interview for later broadcast. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's just like making a live broadcast. Are you ready, Charlie?
We'll need a sound check.
This is Alice Ashton of WCTH, the Voice of New England. How's that?
Fine. Say something, Doc.
What do you want me to say?
Just anything. He needs to make sure the mics are adjusted.
This is Howard Dyer, a professor emeritus of geology at Miskatonic University of Arkham, Massachusetts.
Okay, that's fine.
This is much more convenient than transcribing to disc.
Yes, I imagine so.
Levels are good. Little echo in here, but it won't hurt anything. I can play with it before we go on the air anyway. Okay. Ready anytime you are, Miss Ashton.
All right. Are you comfortable, Professor?
Yes, I suppose so.
Rolling, Charlie?
Ready, and...
Alice Ashton interviewing Professor Howard Dyer at his home in Arkham, Massachusetts, January 5th, 1946. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your reporter, Alice Ashton, broadcasting from the home of Professor Howard Dyer in Arkham, Massachusetts. Welcome to New England News, Dr. Dyer.
Thank you, Miss Ashton. I am grateful for the opportunity to speak.
As our listeners will remember, you were a celebrity before the war. In fact, some people feel you were as famous as Admiral Byrd.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
Well, I'm sure your colleagues at Miskatonic University think of you as a celebrity. You led the famous Dyer expedition of 1930 to Antarctica.
Yes. I was responsible for that disaster.
Perhaps our younger listeners need to be reminded that several of your exploration team unfortunately died on that expedition.
Yes, far too many. And if the planned renewal of Antarctic exploration goes forward, many more will die. Perhaps everyone.
Everyone on the projected Byrd expedition, you mean?
Everyone on Earth. The Miskatonic expedition of 15 years ago was the first to reach the mountains, the mountains of madness, poor young Danforth called them. And there we found such terror that as head of the project I chose to keep silence. But now that the war is over and expeditions are planned once again, I must speak. We sailed from Boston Harbor on September 2nd, 1930, taking a leisurely course down the coast and through the Panama Canal. The expedition team commanders included Professors Pabody and Lake of the Miskatonic Biology Department, Atwood of the Physics Department, and as leader of the expedition, myself, representing geology. We had, besides, 16 assistants and mechanics, 4 Dornier airplanes, and the materials and equipment for 2 entire seasons of Antarctic exploration. Among the graduate students who accompanied us was poor Stephen Danforth, my chief assistant and pilot. On November 7th, Danforth and I were at the rail as our ship passed Franklin Island.
Bleak, isn't it, Dr. Dyer?
Bleak and forbidding, Danforth, and a little frightening.
Like the plateau of Leng.
I beg your pardon?
The cold wastes are places of terror, and none more so than that dread upland plateau of Leng, the frozen place where the old ones walk. That's from the Necronomicon.
Oh, yes. I've never read that.
Strange how the old myth cycles all see the frozen poles as places of terror. You know, Edgar Allan Poe's The Narrative of A. Gordon Pym reaches its terrible climax at the South Pole. And
Danforth, if you would pay more attention to your geology texts and less to works of popular fiction, you would be a better student. Though perhaps not as interesting.
Stephen Danforth. Isn't he the one who...
Yes, Miss Ashton, permanently and completely. And I blame myself.
And when did it happen?
Not right away. We established our base camp on the Great Ross Ice Barrier on November the 9th. I need not repeat what the newspapers at the time reported. Our ascent of Mount Erebus, our successful mineral borings, our tests of Peabody's new ice-melting apparatus. Our progress was remarkable through the exploration flight of January the 6th, 1931, when Lake, Peabody, Daniels, 6 of the students, and myself flew directly over the South Pole in 2 of the planes. Lake's plane was blown off course on the return leg, and that was the occasion when he glimpsed the mysterious uncharted mountain range. From then on, the mountains were his obsession and his doom. Previously, Lake had discovered incredibly ancient fossils in the high, dry valleys near Mount Erebus. Now he was afire to explore this great unknown mountain range.
Dyer, we must mount a sub-expedition to the mountains. Already we've discovered the first Precambrian fossils ever recovered. Who knows what we may find if we locate fossiliferous strata? Gedney agrees with me.
Yes, in fact, I do. If you'll give us the planes...
Wait, gentlemen. We have already set our agenda for exploration, and I cannot...
We set our schedule before discovering the fossils.
But we'll lose time, and it'll mean splitting the party. Who would go on the southwestern expedition, Lake?
Myself, of course, and Gedney. Carroll is chief pirate, Moulton, Atwood, some of the students. There are a dozen men at all.
A dozen? You'll leave us with only 8 men at the base station?
But, Dr. Dyer, your major exploration won't begin until February, and by then we should...
Please, Gedney. Lake, I couldn't possibly allow you to take all 4 planes. What if a storm damaged them all? How would you get back?
That's hardly likely. Besides, they're the dog sleds. We could use all 4 planes in rotation to establish a base camp, then send 2 back to you.
I allowed myself to be persuaded. In the end, a dozen of our men left on the Lake expedition. Within a week, Lake had established a camp near the foothills of the Great Unknown Range. He sent 2 of the aircraft back to us at the main base, and he set out on his explorations. At about 4 p.m., January the 18th, the wireless operator came to me in a state of high excitement. Lake was reporting in, and what he had to say was indeed most extraordinary.
We've completed an airplane survey of the higher reaches. At 20,000 feet, the mountains are almost free of snow and ice, and the rock surfaces appear to be of Jurassic and Comanchean limestones with intrusions of Triassic and Permian slates. We are establishing a drilling camp on an outcrop of sandstone.
All day, the reports continued. The sandstone gave way to Comanchean limestone, and then, to the surprise of all...
Lake reporting. A few minutes ago, Gedney came in to tell me the drilling apparatus has broken through into a cave, and the bit has come up with bits of cephalopods, coral, and spirifera fossils in great abundance. We are preparing to blast an opening that will allow us to descend into the cave.
And they did so. It became obvious that the opening was no cave, but in fact a tunnel, extending indefinitely in both directions. Stalactites and stalagmites sprouted abundantly, but the most important find was the incredible profusion of bones, washed down from unknown jungles of Mesozoic tree ferns and fungi, forests of tertiary cycads, fan palms, and primitive angiosperms. The bones comprised a cross-section of millions of years of life. There were shark teeth and dinosaur vertebrae, pterodactyl wing bones, remains of primitive mammals. There was nothing like it in the history of paleontology. And then came the discovery of one fossil that no one could explain.
Gedney here. Professor Lake is at the site. He wanted me to report the finding of a star-shaped fragment, about 6 inches across and 1.5 inches thick. It is of a greenish soapstone. It is like a 5-pointed star, with 4 of the points broken off, and oddest of all, it seems to have been worked, though the level it comes from would place it during the age of dinosaurs. We will check in again in 3 hours.
Professor Dyer, correct me if I'm wrong, but you never reported any of this before.
I've never mentioned it, Miss Ashton, but with the United States government now planning more Antarctic exploration, I must break my silence.
Did you bring back any of these unusual fossils?
We did not. However, we have some very remarkable photographs and other supporting evidence which the public has never seen.
Did you learn what kind of a fossil the star-shaped item was?
Oh, yes. We learned its nature. It was not a fossil at all, but something else, something made. And would to God we'd never discovered the terrible secret. Our next report from the expedition was also from Gedney, and also delivered in tones of the utmost excitement.
Gedney reporting for the lake expedition. At 10:15 p.m., Orndorff and Watkins, working underground with light, found a monstrous barrel-shaped fossil of wholly unknown nature. Dr. Lake believes it is probably vegetable, unless it is an overgrown specimen of some unknown marine radiata. The peculiar thing is that it seems more frozen than petrified. Over.
Extraordinary. Gedney, can you describe the specimen? Over.
The tissues are leathery, but astonishingly flexible. It is of 6 feet from end to end, 3 feet 8 inches central diameter, tapering to 1 foot at each end. It's like a barrel, with 5 bulging ridges in place of stays. Lateral breakages, as the thin stalks, are at the equator in the middle of the ridges. In the furrows between the ridges are curious growths, like combs or wings, that fold up or spread out like fans. Only one is complete, but it opens to a 7-foot spread.
My God, the elder things.
I didn't get that, Bates. Please repeat, over.
Nothing, Gedney. Continue. Over.
That is all for now. Dr. Lake or I will be on the air again in 2 hours. Lake expedition out.
What did you say, Danforth?
The elder things, Professor. What Gedney was describing matched the descriptions of the elder things. The great old ones in primal myth and in the Necronomicon.
Oh, really, Danforth?
I'm sorry, Professor Pavity, but the fact is the descriptions are the same. Exactly the same.
Over the next 24 hours, we heard more news of the monstrous creatures. The lake expedition discovered a cluster of them, 13 in all, each beneath one of those curious star-shaped soapstone carvings. For by now it was clear that the stars were carven stone, not organic fossils. 8 of the creatures were curiously perfect, as Lake reported by radio.
We have brought the last of the creatures into camp. We're having trouble with the dogs. They can't endure the new specimens and would probably tear them to pieces if we didn't keep them at a distance. Over.
Lake, will you transport these fossils to the base camp? Over.
No, Bates, not yet. First we will dissect one. These barrel growths are the strangest things I've ever seen. I cannot determine whether they are vegetable or animal. A dissection is imperative. Over.
Lake, how on earth can you dissect a fossil? Over.
These are not, repeat, not fossils, Bates. They are preserved specimens, frozen by the incredibly low temperatures. I will thaw one out slowly and then dissect it. Lake expedition out.
What did the dissection reveal, Dr. Dyer?
It was puzzling, Miss Ashton. The creatures stood 6 to 8 feet tall in life, and the extremities were star-shaped organs, a head at one end, or so Lake assumed, and an arrangement of legs and feet at the other. The head bore 5 reddish feeding tubes and 5 yellow breathing tubes. The body, in addition to the incredible wings, bore 5 bundles of manipulating tentacles. The star organ at the base had legs measuring 4 feet in length, with a triangular-shaped pseudo-foot at the end of each of the 5 legs. All was incredibly tough and resilient. Lake concluded, somewhat hastily, that the creatures were animal in nature, probably a fantastically advanced evolution of the radiata.
And from what period of prehistory did this creature come? Was it on Earth, when the dinosaurs lived?
Lake could not say. He was aghast at the monstrosity, so primitive in form, but with an incredibly advanced nervous system. And it appeared to be perfectly amphibious, at home in either air or water. He told us he was preparing to dissect a second creature, And that was the last communication we had from Professor Lake.
What happened to him?
We did not know, Miss Ashton. When the Lake expedition missed 2 scheduled radio times, we had a council of war about them.
I say we should give them one more chance to respond, and then send a rescue party. There may have been a storm.
I agree, but I cannot send both of our remaining airplanes. That would be madness, particularly if the weather is bad.
I will take a plane, then, and...
No. It's my responsibility. Danforth will fly me to the Lake camp. In a pinch, the Dornier should be able to transport everyone back.
Yes, if we gas it up completely and get rid of every ounce of extra weight.
Then that's my decision. Danforth, get the plane ready. Rip out everything that you can. You'll have 4 hours. If the Lake party does not report in by that time, you and I will fly out to investigate. At 7:15 a.m. on January 25th, Danforth and I set off. We carried with us 7 dogs, a sledge, emergency food rations and fuel, and a spare wireless outfit. In an emergency, we were prepared to leave everything, including the dogs, if we had to fly wounded men back to the base. We hoped, of course, that we would find that the Lake expedition had only had difficulty with its short-wave equipment. For 4.5 hours, we flew steadily southwestward. Then, for the first time, we saw the extraordinary ramparts of the unknown mountain range.
Incredible! How tall would you say they are, Dr. Dyer?
I don't know, Danforth. Everest is out of the running, that's for certain. Some of those peaks must be 35,000 feet above sea level.
They're witch-like, bleak and bare and black. What are those? Those cubes?
Where?
All around the summits, Doctor. Like blocks clinging to the sides of the peaks. They're too regular to be geological.
Yes, I see them now. I see, but I can't understand them, Danforth, no more than you can.
You know, the anthropologists have placed the plateau of Leng in Central Asia, but now I don't know. I believe you were right about the Necronomicon, Professor Dyer.
What do you mean?
I wish I'd never read the damn book.